Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Artemis, Batgirl and Zatanna? Part 2. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, so without wasting any time let's get into the video. Space, Watchtower. The pair of sharp eyes watched frame by frame what happened that night at the high school building. Several facial expressions that did not belong on the young heroes' faces could be seen when they did a mission as a team. Many of those expressions consisted of distrust, jealousy, and too many to name were clear to all that would have watched this recording. Only with the exception of Susanoo's facial expressions which were hidden behind his mask, and only the flaring of his eyes was any indication of his mood, with the exception of his rough body language. He replayed the scene where he noticed a shadow slip over the schoolyard, and if it wasn't for Susanoo noticing, the team would have had a lot of problems as this person was a master assassin, infamous and praised at the same time through the underworld. Cheshire. Female assassins are one of the most dangerous killers in the world. And rumors said that she was trained by one of the best in the world, an assassin that even Ra's al Ghul was nothing more than a toddler in his shadow. Of course, Ra's al Ghul had tried to recruit this assassin to work for him, but failed only partly in his mission. Why partially, you ask? Dark finger gloves raced over the holograms, and an image of a young woman of Chinese origin came into view. Under the picture, letters appeared and a name shimmered into existence. Lady Shiva. Once trained by him, you will lay down an oath. An oath you will never get free of nor betray your master. You can see the martial arts technique that is taught by this master, but you will never master it without his guidance and training. And if you thought to play smart, think again as the one that tried to pass his or her knowledge to a third party. Only death awaits you if you don't have the concession of this master. But Lady Shiva was not the only one trained by this master, no. The team encountered not one, but two at the same night and in the same facility. These so-called students of this master are Cheshire and Ravager, two master assassins. His young team were extremely lucky in many ways. One of his team's member is a very skilled martial art fighter with tremendous tactical insight and a cool mind that is not afraid of beating his own men into order when the need arises. Second is that he is very skilled in poisoning and already administered the antidotes to those that were hit by the darts, and lastly, Cheshire and Ravager were not seriously fighting for the kill, and that begs the question, why? Sinking so deep into thought that he blocked everything out of his surrounding, he didn't notice the door of the computer lab slide open and a tall, broad man in a dark blue suit with a large S-shield on his chest, with his crimson cloak attached over his shoulders, entered the lab and made his way over to him. The big, firm hand landed on his shoulders that shook him out of his mind and back to the present as he turned his head to see who interrupted his thoughts. Bruce said one of his oldest friends since he took the identity of Batman, standing slightly behind him, stands the world's greatest hero, Superman. A human-like alien from the planet Krypton who was sent by his parents to Earth in order to survive. It is time. Clark, then let us go to the meeting. The Dark Knight pushed his chair back and stood up. Bruce brought his hand up towards his cowl and slid it over his face, taking the identity of Batman. Together the men left the room, and the door slid closed behind them and sealed the room again, while the two men walked through the hall, one in deep thought. The other, not so much. Moving through the hall they arrived at the main wing where the Monitor and Hall of Justice are located. The pair stopped at a wall where a hidden door slid open, and they entered the secret elevator that brought them to the Hall of Justice, a place where every meeting is held. Superman and Batman entered the Hall of Justice when the elevator slid open, and they joined the other heroes that started Justice League. An U-form table stand in the center, and Batman's eyes fell on a tall, fair-skinned woman with straight waist-length black hair with sharp blue eyes. She is ageless and attractive in appearance, sporting a slender yet curvaceous frame with sizable bust and lean yet well-muscled build. She wears a strapless red bustier held up by a brace of gold resembling two W's. She has a large golden belt and blue briefs with 5 white stars on them. She wears red boots with a white stripe on the front. This is Wonder Woman, a princess of the Amazons. She wears silver bracers around her wrists, red star earrings, and wears a golden diadem with a red star on her forehead. Seating next to her is a tall athletic muscular man who wears a full bodysuit that is all red, but has 2 small lightning bolts across the waist and the wrists. And a lightning bolt logo on his chest with a round white background. This is Flash, fastest man in the world, and he smiled when he caught sight of 2 most famous Earth's heroes. "Yo bats, decided to get out of the cave," jested Flash in a humorous way when Batman walked past him. The Dark Knight moved past a tall, muscular, bearded Caucasian male with short blonde hair, a beard, and aqua blue eyes and a strong build. He wears an orange scale mail tunic and dark green leggings. At his waist is a gold belt clasped with a stylized letter A, and he also wears golden gauntlets on his wrists and dark green greaves. How are Kid Flash and Aquila doing on the team? Aquaman turned his eyes towards Flash and locked eyes with him that said, "Be serious, Flash." The Atlantean had heard some news from his protege about the new additions to the team. His protege, Aqualid, was not really friendly towards them, but after some guidance, he learned to accept them into the team. After all, he used a well-known hero as an example. "Welcome Batman, I can assume that this meeting was called for a discussion about the team." "Indeed, Aquaman." Batman with the King of Atlantis as he took his seat amongst them and stared at them one by one. Each one of the Justice League members looked back at him when he pressed several buttons and a hologram appeared of Susanoo and his stats. "Welcome esteemed League members. Before we start this meeting, I want to wait for John Johns and Green Arrow." Batman had barely spoken when a door slid open and a tall green-skinned humanoid with a bald head entered. His face is oddly proportioned, with heavy brows, thick lips, and red eyes. His costume is primarily black, with red accents, and a large red belt and X-shaped straps across his chest. He always wears a blue cape that fastened by golden clips. The Martian looked around at the gathered heroes with his stoic expression and expressed his apologies by waving his hand before taking his seat at the table. "I must share the news that Green Arrow was called back to Starling City. The mission that the young team of heroes emerged victoriously from did not go over well with the League of Shadows, and they retaliated with force." "Unfortunate news, John. Does Arrow need our help?" Superman said towards the Martian, who shook his head negatively. The large man smiled at the Martian, who believes that Arrow can handle the shadows on his own. Many Leaguers would have a hard time against them, but a few of them actually had trained under the shadows and fought back. One of them was Green Arrow that freed himself from their grip and from Ra's al Ghul's self-appointed mission of finding an heir. "If that is all, Batman, you may start our meeting." "Thank you, Superman." 2 days ago, Young Justice gained a mission from the former protege of Green Arrow, Speedy, now named Red Arrow. Flash's laughter interrupted Batman's speech when the detective shared the news of Speedy changing his name to something unoriginal. Batman's eyes narrowed in on the speedster, who cut himself off and decided to be serious in this case, if only to escape from his glare. "Now that Flash has had his laugh, I can continue. The mission that he delivered to us was safeguarding a brilliant young scientist, Serling Raquette. She invented a terrible weapon that she called the Fog. A weapon that is made from millions of microscopic robots with their main objective is stealing intel. The Shadows had abducted her 2 weeks before Red Arrow could rescue her and delivered us the mission that my team took with several new members, including the young man you see here. His name is Susanoo. He looks like someone ready to go to war with his costume," shared Wonder Woman when her eyes fell for the first time on this young man. Her instinct told her immediately this man is a warrior, someone that fights to the bitter end. She studied each nook and cranny of his costume. The arm bracers with claws, the Kevlar armor that looked so similar to that of her friend, and finally his rippled mask that kept his civilian identity a secret. Any idea on how he acquired this armor or his tools, including his unique weapon? "No clue. But I can assume that he has a rich benefactor that supports him behind the scene, but even that is illogical." Many Leaguers looked expectantly at him, knowing that the most famous hero would come with a deduction at why he believes that. Martian Manhunter gestured with his hand to Batman for him to reveal his deduction. "My reason first is that many rich people in Gotham are criminals with the exception of the Wayne family. There might be others that could be his supporters, but certainly neither criminals nor villains, as he did rescue my protege from Scarecrow." "Wait. You are suspecting one of them of being this Susanoo of yours?" Superman exclaimed in disbelief when he made a connection with the second richest family in Gotham or the world, the Namikaze. A billionaire that had helped several cities with his upstanding hospitals and other facilities, and unlike Wayne Industries and LexCorp, they don't deal with weapons. The Man of Steel had a great deal of respect for the Namikaze family that works and supports the world with their hospitals. So it was a great shock for him to hear his best friend claim one of them being the Susanoo. "There is no way, Bruce, that one of them is this ninja that you had encountered." "Calm down, Clark, I know it sounds unreasonable, but looks at this. Observe," was the only thing Batman said to his allies while he pressed some buttons and the hologram of Susanoo slid towards the side and a large holographic screen appeared in the center in a triangle formation that showed everyone exactly what happened on the mission. Several brows raised in surprise when Aquaman's apprentice behaved so cold and different from them. Especially when Kid Flash blamed Green Arrow's ward for driving Red Arrow from the team. The heroes shook their heads at Kid's behavior and Aqualid made his mentor sigh deeply. Staying quiet, the heroes kept watching and observing the young heroes until the report of the mission ended. Observing his fellow heroes, he demanded attention from them. "What you saw was the end result of several mission reports from all the members of Young Justice, and from their reports, I made this video. All of you have observed, now I ask. What are your views on the team, but especially about the members?" Each member of the League pulled up an image of their own apprentice or someone they felt or think they could have a connection with. Wonder Woman decided to pull up the goddess of the hunt as she was well impressed by her skills with the bow. A smile tugged at her lips when she could see different from a different angle how she used her skills, and all the leaguers were just like her observing and writing a report on the one they watched. Mount Justice. Batgirl moved with flexibility over the training field, using small, short movements to avoid the bursts of attacks from Susanoo. Her opponent uses a strange fighting stance that she had never encountered or heard about. She moved under an arm that was a ruse as she fell straight for the trap when his other limb planted his finger in a quick session and several different nerves points that made her arm numb. Rolling backward and propelling herself into the air with one arm and she landed with a dull thud on her feet, Batgirl looked up at her opponent. What was that? She could barely squeeze her question out before she was forced to block it with her only working arm, and Batgirl left herself wide open for Susanoo's following move. He dropped to his knee and swept her legs from under her with his own. With a loud thud, she fell on her back and the computer echoed through the training room. "Hail Batgirl. Are you alright?" asked Susanoo as he extended his hand to help her back to her feet. Batgirl smiled at him, nodding her head that she was alright and grasped his hand with her own. Susanoo flexed his muscles slightly and pulled her up like he was picking up a spoon. The ninja led her out of the training facility and towards the common room while he answered her question. "The fighting stance that I used in our training is what is called juken, or in common language, it is called the gentle fist. A fighting style that is adapted to hit the nerve system of the human body. It can numb, slow down someone's speed, or take the whole body out of commission." Batgirl listened to his explanation of what his style could do, and she was impressed at how it took her out or would do to future opponents, that might be allies in training or villains who are just unlucky to cross his path. The pair walked out of the hall together and arrived at the common training hall where they encountered Superboy and Aquila training together. Watching them were Kid Flash in his civilian clothes and Artemis, who is in a conversation with Megan. "Don't you think? Handsome. Commanding," Artemis said with a hand gesture towards the two boys in training, at which Megan giggled slightly. The two girls were watching the boys train in their fighting style that so far seemed equal. "You should totally ask him out. Halder is like a brother to me. But you know who would the cutest couple?" Megan countered with a witty comment of her own. Here Artemis rose a brow in question at whom the Martian would imply. "You and Wally." The crunching sound caught the girls' attentions and they turned to see Wally eat a sandwich passionately. The food oil and small crumbs of bread that she could spot on his face and the terribly loud sounds of him chewing made Artemis' stomach turn inwardly. Megan, who hadn't noticed or just plainly avoided the disturbing face that her fellow girl had, continued at why they would be together. "You're so full of passion and he's so full of it." Batgirl finished helpfully when she joined the group of girls. At Batgirl's helpful comment, the girls broke out in a fit of giggles that made Kid Flash stop devouring his food, and with a speed that made him famous throughout America, he sped to Batgirl's side. "Hey girl, how about you and I go out tonight and I will show you my moves?" Kid smoothly tried to ask her out with his brows dancing on his face. Said girl he was hitting on backed away from him when she noticed the crumbles and the oil dripping off his face, now that she could see up close. But it seems Kid was ignorant of his messy face as he stepped closer. "You already know I am Kid Flash, fastest kid on earth, but you can call me Wally or honey." "Jay, just clean your face, Wally." Batgirl brought out while sending a pleading look towards Susanoo's back, who watched the other members of the team train. The archer now turned around as her stomach worsened when she could see up close and screech. "Wally. Clean. Your. Funking. Face." She punctuated each word with a stamp of her foot against the floor. Artemis wouldn't want to touch him with a 2-meter stick, let alone with her own finger. Another thing is that Kid Flash pushed his own face into hers with all his crumbly glory as he glared at her with his brows scrunched together, lips pursed in a small line and hands on his hips. "And why do you butt in, second-rated archer?" Wally insulted her, at which she sent him a death glare. Said second-rated bow mistress, and Archer prepared herself to blow her top when the girl that Wally tried to hit on replied smugly. "Sorry Wally, you are not my type and I have already someone that I like, someone that I spend most of my day with besides fighting crime and rescue the world." Wally's mouth dropped to the floor before he reined it in and laughed boastfully. "Ha. I bet it is a normal boy, no skills, no superpowers, and certainly not as quick as me." Artemis and Batgirl rolled their eyes at him, not understanding how someone like him could become the apprentice of Flash or how he can be related to him. But there was someone else that had listened beside the girls to Kid's boasting comment. Crimson eyes narrowed coldly while the three Tomo circled around his black iris rapidly. And his hands clenched into fists, he turned his head to look over his shoulder and with one eye glanced at Kid Flash. "Not everything is about being a hero or about having superpowers or skills to like someone. This person who Batgirl has feelings for might be an ordinary civilian, but I bet that he cares greatly about her and she for him." Susanoo supported Batgirl's interest. Then suddenly he laughed loudly, gaining the attention of the whole team, including those in training. When he had finally calmed down and looked mockingly at Kid Flash, he spoke with a hint of humor in his voice. "Kid Flash, you might be the quickest child on the earth, but I bet he can outlast you in the stamina department." Several faces gained a dark red tint when the blood rushed towards their faces. The girls stared in disbelief at the most stoic member of the team, a fellow hero who most of the team had a very intimidating stare when he looks at you with those cold crimson eyes. And this intimidating teammate just made a joke, a freaking mockery about Kid Flash's greatest ability. "Dude. That is so not cool." Wally shouted indignantly, which brought Batgirl out of her fantasy world where she was skinny dipping with her best friend. Her best friend with wild, spiky blonde hair, mesmerizing sapphire eyes that looked at her lovingly, and his athletic muscular frame. She brought her hand to her face, and to her surprise, she noticed her face was warm, and it was red in color. Oh, so embarrassing. Next to Batgirl, Artemis watched how Kid Flash stormed towards Susanoo, who kept staring at him with his one eye. Storming was maybe the wrong choice of words, as in reality, Kid Flash vanished from her sight and appeared next to the ninja with a fist a few inches from Susanoo's chin, who had stopped him by grasping his arm. At the same time, a panel opened at the ceiling, and Red Tornado descended down to the floor, and with a stoic expression and level voice, he addressed the problem in sight. "Any problems here, or was there not enough space on the training field?" "No problems here," laughed Kid while Susanoo released his arm and the team gathered around them. The ninja stepped a few feet back and crossed his arms at the sorry attempt of Kid's lie. Well, Red Tornado is an android, he is a highly advanced one that could easily see through it, but it seems that he ignored it for now, as something bigger and more important was taking place. "Only friendly training. Red, do you have a mission for us?" "The mission assignment is Batman's responsibility, but I think assigning one will make the team closer and understand each other on a better level." Red Tornado moves to the center of the field, and a hologram shimmered in existence, and he pressed a few buttons, and an image of an elderly man appeared in the air. The man in the hologram looked no older than 90 years of age, he wears an Armani suit, and in his hand, he held a black walking stick with a golden eagle head handle. "This is Kent Nelson, a friend. He is 116 years old. I assume he is someone important, Red." Susanoo assumed while he studied the profile and stats that showed next to the image. At first sight, he seemed to be totally normal, human. But years of training and combat taught him to look underneath the underneath, that showed that this old man holds quite some power inside him if you go by the intel the stats gives. Red Tornado was impressed by this young hero, no, a real hero that just like Batman, has a sharp eye for details. "You're assumed correct, Susanoo. Kent Nelson has been missing for 29 days and counting. Kent was a charter member of the Justice Society, the precursor to some of your mentors' Justice League. Nelson was Earth Sorcerer Supreme, he was Dr. Fate," Aqualid said with admiration for the greatest sorcerer of the world. Years studying the path of magic in Poseidonis, his city that lay hidden in the ocean where he was born, he had heard of course of this well-talented sorcerer. Alas, not everyone shared his admiration for the sorcerer, as Wally stuck out his tongue at Calder's back for such a foolish thing for believing in the existence of magic. More like Dr. Fake. Guy knows a little of advanced science and Dumbledore's it up and tried to impress the babes. Murmured the speedster, making air quotes for Dumbledore's, at which Artemis sent him a scathing glare and Batgirl rolled her eyes at his disbelief. Batgirl had plenty of confrontation with magic users in her career as a crime fighter. Red Tornado continued his briefing. Kent Nelson may simply be on one of his walkabouts, but he is the caretaker of the Helmet of Fate, the source of the Doctor's mystic might, and it is unwise to leave such power unguarded. Red Tornado finished his briefing, at which the Martian compared Earth Sorcerer with those of her own planet. "He's like the great sorcerer priests and priestesses of Mars. I'll be honored to help in finding him." A light bulb goes off in Wally's mind when he heard his crush joyfully support helping in the search of this charlatan. He raised his hand and smirked at Batgirl before his eyes focused on Miss Martian. This was much to the ire of a certain ninja who wanted to ask a few more questions, so he will not encounter any surprises. "Me too, so honored I can barely stand it. Magic rocks." A smirk adorned his face as he made the rock sign with his hands, while Red Tornado pulled a golden key out from somewhere that made Susanoo wonder if he had planned this beforehand. The young ninja stepped forward and took the key in his hands before pocketing it away in one of his seals that were hidden in his pockets. "This is a key, I suspect not a normal one, as is it quite expensive to make one out of gold." Tornado nodded and explained what purpose the key served. The team nodded in acceptance of the mission, and 5 minutes later the team found themselves in the bio ship. Space, Watchtower. Red Tornado to the League, I have sent the team to investigate the disappearance of Kent Nelson. The gathered heroes looked up at the screen to see the android in Mount Justice, with still the images and intel about Kent Nelson. I want to share that the following members of the team are on the investigation: Kid Flash, Aqualid, Superboy, Miss Martian, Batgirl, Artemis, and Susanoo. The last mentioned was very sharp during the briefing, picking up what the danger might be if someone with less than a good intention gets a hold of the helmet. Elaborate? Demanded Batman, at which the fellow leaguers nodded at his fast grip of understanding of the situation. The others understand the seriousness of this situation, but also they were slightly curious at how the team would do on this mission. Red Tornado debriefed the entire league. Susanoo had a deliberate presence the whole time I was in his presence. I also heard he is like that within the team. This manner of his made several team members feeling inferior and make them made uncharacteristic decisions. Who are these members? Aquaman questioned the android while trying to solve this problem. It is very dangerous during missions to do uncharacteristic things that could bring danger to the whole team. Hopefully, the team would solve this on their own and show the league that they are ready to go solo. The following members that show these signs are Aqualad, Kid Flash, and Robin. Especially after Susanoo mentioned restricting Red Arrow access to anything related to the league and the new team. Again, the league could understand, and others understood that Batman tried in his own way to find the bridge to repair the bond with Arrow and his former protege Red Arrow, but after Susanoo's little test at the ninja's base and the reasoning of the same ninja at Mount Justice, Batman had no choice but to follow what everyone knew was the safest way. The point that he will address later in the meeting. Appointed Aqualad the team leader for this mission with Susanoo secondary when it is necessary. I believe that Aqualad's inexperience caused this small resentment, and on this mission, he will learn from Susanoo how to lead. Also, he is not someone to hold long grudges. Then I come to the following member, Kid Flash. Flash's apprentice might learn something today. Salem. The team consisting of Batgirl, Aqualad, Artemis, Kid Flash, Superboy and Miss Martian at the controls all looked up when Susanoo hung up his phone and then called up a screen. Images of a medieval tower appeared with little to no information. But the small intel that they do have is what might help them in successfully completing this mission without any trouble. Red Tornado appointed Aqualad as team leader. I have no qualms with that. Susanoo started his briefing. The majority of the team knows him from earlier missions or before the forming of this team, but I will step in if it becomes too dangerous. I don't care if he is the leader or not when it goes downhill, but I care about my friends and team members surviving in one piece. Now, this image is what the magical practitioners call the Tower of Fate. A place that is magical and holds many secrets of the world and its universe, and the intel that I gathered from a friend told me that it has security installed that activates booby traps. He now locked eyes with each member, and his eyes stayed a fraction longer on Kid Flash. Now, a warning. Do not lie to the tower. We won't, Artemis and Batgirl said in unison while glaring at Kid Flash, telling him to keep his mouth shut when they entered the tower. Aqualad smiled slightly. While he was at first resentful of Susanoo during their first mission, he could now see that, just like him, Susanoo wanted the team to stay alive. The Atlantean knows that he needs time to get over his feelings of resentfulness towards his newest member that is in many ways a much better leader than him. Maybe he needs to ask him for some tips, yeah, that might help him along the way. Thank you, Susanoo, for giving me a chance to prove myself as a leader. Susanoo sends Calder a nod that told him he didn't hold any resentment towards him. Aqualad turned his attention back to the window as the screen disappeared and in front of his eyes, a tower appeared at the center of a neat green grass field. The bio ship landed silently in front of the tower and the team departed and walked under the guidance of the Atlantean towards the tower, where Susanoo handed over the key to his leader who unlocked the tower. The key sank into the keyhole and a sound resounded through the clearing. In front of the team's eyes, a tower shimmered in existence and Calder placed his hand on the door. Looking back at his teammates he repeated. Beware Susanoo's warning, no lying today. PSK, this is just the use of adaptive micro-optic electronics, combined with phase shifting. Ouch. Murmured Kid Flash under his breath, making sure that Miss Martian would not hear him when they entered the tower. He grunted under the rough treatment when Artemis elbowed him in his side, and a moment later they stepped into an empty room with no doors. Turning back to the door they came through was gone too. Superboy glanced around, his eyes using his ability to see through everything, and he blushed slightly when he caught sight of Megan's soft green skin. The boy of steel could now slightly understand his father, or so he hoped, did not use this ability so much. With a strong voice that would mask his uncertainty of what he had seen, he called out what everyone thought. Where did the door go? This might be one of the tower's powers to keep intruders out. Susanoo, any ideas? Aqualad looked around to find a way deeper into the tower. But all he could see were solid walls that reach high up until you could not even see the ceiling. The Atlantean could feel the presence of his teammate joining his side, and it was scary at how he could move so silently. Try to show him the key. If this item belongs to Kent, the tower would recognize it. Following Susanoo's requesting, Aqualad opened his hand and on his palm laid the small trinket that glowed a faint golden light. At first, nothing happened in the space they find themselves into, but then a see-through version of Kent Nelson appeared in the room that addressed them. "Greetings, you have entered with a key, but the tower does not recognize you. State your purpose and intent." A scoffing sound erupted behind the team, and Kid Flash stepped past the others. Susanoo was moving in to intercept him, but Aqualid stepped in his way. The leader sent a pleading look to him, and if that was not enough he explained his intent at why he stopped him. "Susanoo, I know that we did not have a great start on the team, but you gave me a chance in leading this team, and I as the leader have faith in Kid like you have faith in me." Susanoo nodded reluctantly, hoping that his trust didn't come back to bite him in the ass. Like any experienced leader he needs to build that trust, and right now this is a new start for almost the whole team. Stepping back he earned a smile from Aqualid who now turned his attention to the speedster, catching his words and grimacing. "We are true believers, here to find Dr. Fate." Aqualid cursed under his breath as the muscles in his body coiled together in preparation for anything. Eyes alert for anything that might make its way towards them, and he could see some members of his team followed suit. So it came as a surprise to Susanoo, Batgirl, Artemis and himself when nothing happened. "I expected, and that's when it happened." The tiles under their feet fell down into a hole that eerily radiated an orange light below them. It was not only the glow that awaited them below, along the walls were several spikes that would drill holes into them if they used their grapple hooks to swing their way to safety. "Batgirl. Artemis," exclaimed Susanoo as he pulled a tool out of his suit that he threw to the mentioned heroines that caught it neatly. The three heroes pulled their arms together and moved faster through the air towards their doom. Moving past Aqualid, Superboy and Kid Flash, the three heroes were now in front of them. They sweated as they could feel the heat radiating onto their skin, now. Batgirl, Artemis and Susanoo pulled the trigger as if they had repeated the process countless times. The first thing that appeared was Susanoo's net that shot its hooks into the wall, with Batgirl and Artemis's line launcher shooting through the net to provide more anchoring. The team sighed in relief when they fell into the net, but that thought didn't linger long when the wall gave out in the telling sign of crumbling. Aqualid-eyed widened in shock when he felt himself and the others full again, and with pure willpower, he gathered his intellect back together to form a plan. "Artemis with me. Batgirl with Superboy. Susanoo with Kid. Megan fly and think of a way out, now." The leader inside him muscled its way towards the surface, each pairing would survive the confrontation with the spikes. And like the Atlantean ordered, so it was as Artemis sailed towards him, grasping her grapple hook and stuck it into the wall while he pulled out his water bearers, knowing that he only had one shot of using his water. The pair flew towards the deadly wall and concentrated with all his will before he called out a wall of water that crashed against the spike, cushioned their meeting with them. A few feet below them, Batgirl and Superboy were in a heated conversation where Batgirl reasoned of using him as a cushion with his indestructible skin. "Don't order me around." Superboy angrily retorted back to Batgirl who sailed closer to the now recognized lava below. The Boy of Steel did not take kindly that the apprentice of Batman wanted to use him to soften the blow of the spikes. The same could be said to another pair of heroes that had no love between them, Kid Flash and Susanoo. The aforementioned one avoided every attempt of rescuing by him, he wanted to be rescued by the beautiful Megan. "Don't touch me." Kid Flash exclaimed wildly, rejecting the thought that below them was real lava. In all his studies and projects, there can't be lava several feet under them in an area where there has never been any seismic activity. This lava is the sorry attempt at a realistic hologram like that gold, glowing Kent Nelson that appeared in front of them. "I want to be rescued by Megan if we have to play along with this so-called death fall into fake lava. This is certainly a realistic hologram like the dude that glowed back up there. Be real, kid. This is no stupid attempt to get all lovey-dove with you. This is a real life or death situation," Susanoo bellowed in a fit of rage. Eyes flashing angrily as he knew that this was not the time to keep his powers a secret. Never thought that this was the way he would come out of the shadows, his hands already going through the hand seals when Megan's voice suddenly cut through. "Hello Megan, we never truly answered the question." Megan tapped her own head in a funny way and tilted her head slightly up to look through the opening above. "Red Tornado sent us to see if Mr. Nelson and the helmet are safe." The words had barely left her lips when all the spikes retreated back in the wall. The lava below them vanished when a platform appeared that seemed solid, and the heroes that were still falling fell into something soft and marshmallow-like that surrounded them and slowly melted and left them cool. Aqualid stepped up to Megan and held her shoulders tightly. "Good work Megan, quick thinking." He praised her, at which she smiled. The others joined in on the praise that made her only smile more until everyone turned to see Artemis storm towards Kid and pressed him roughly against the wall. An angry, terrifying expression on her face that told everyone exactly what she thinks. "Enough. Your little impress Megan at all costs game nearly got us all barbecued," snarled the blonde archer towards the speedster. Flash's apprentice didn't respond well under the angry glare that he got from some members and from his leader, a disappointed look. Those looks made him turn angry, and he lashed out verbally. When did this become my fault? Artemis raised a mocking brow at his question. She crossed her arms under her bust to make her stance known. The archer could not believe how ignorant he is towards his team's safety or his rejection of magic. She took a deep breath to calm herself a bit down. It wouldn't help if she suddenly lashed out like a certain member would do if he was quicker here than her. Locking eyes with the speedster, she elaborated. When you lied to that whatever it was and called you a true believer. The Martian looked surprised when Artemis said what the others already thought to be true about the speedster. She turned her head with disbelief towards her friend and asked the question that she had difficulty bringing out. Wally, you don't believe. Wally turned to Megan with a very serious expression that he had never shown before. Not the goofy face that he pulled with Robin and Aqualid, nor the annoyed, resentful one when he was in the presence of Susanoo, or the playful, horny look when he sees a pretty girl. No, this is Wally's scientist face, meaning serious. Fine. I lied about my belief in magic. But magic is the true lie, a major load. At the end of his rant, Wally crossed his arms to show that he means what he said, that every word that left his lips would not make him change his view of magic as a lie. Wally, I studied for a year at the Conservatory of Sorcery in Atlantis. The mystic arts created the skin icons that power my water bearers. Calder explained seriously while he studied the platform that felt cool to the touch. Under his fingertips, he could feel small pulses of magic that convinced him that magic was used to create this. After a moment he looked up to Wally to show him that he was dead serious. Wally groaned in exasperation when everyone around him showed they believe in the fairy tales of magic existing in the world. Seeing the truth in their eyes, he sighed. Deciding to not lose without a fight, he tried to win some of them to his side with words of science. Dude, you ever hear of bioelectricity? Hey, in primal times fire was once considered magical, too. Today it is just all a bunch of tricks. You're pretty close-minded for a guy who can break the sound barrier in his sneakers, Artemis said with her hands on her hips, a scowl on her face that fueled Wally's ire. That's science. I recreated Flash's laboratory experiment, and here I am. Wally drove his passion for science through the wall. He raised his arms, gesturing to everything around them. What happened to us, all around us, can be explained by science. Susanoo moved towards Aqualid and crouched next to him. He had noticed something shimmer into existence, and he slightly smirked under the mask. Let us test that, Mr. Science. Everyone turned their attention towards Susanoo, who has his fingers on a handle and pulled. Ignoring the cries from the speedster, the small cracks of the opening widened until a hole was seen and snow descended upon them. The ninja turned his eyes towards Batgirl, who playfully tried to catch a few snowflakes on her tongue that made him truly smile before he jumped through the opening. His fellow heroes followed his example, and they all landed next to him in the snow. Standing in a circle, Batgirl turned to Wally with a smirk plastered on her face. Do you ever get tired of being wrong? Ever hear of string theory? We're in a pocket dimension. Many fellow members groaned at his response, except for Susanoo, who had moved deeper into the snow-covered area, especially when he noticed a floating object in the middle of it all. Closing the distance between him and this mysterious item, he could make out some familiar signs of what it was. Eyes. Called the ninja back to his fellow members. I think I found Nelson's floating stick. That is ouch. Aqualid gave the speedster a firm slap on the head to keep him quiet and planted his hand on his shoulder so he would not suddenly dash off, creating more problems for them. Batgirl quickly moved past Superboy and Artemis with a curious look in her eyes, and her hand inched closer to the stick when suddenly she felt her fingers being pulled towards it, with the same happening to Susanoo. Ah, I can't let go. The two members of the team exclaimed when the stick refused to let them go. What followed next was purely magical as they were lifted into the air and surrounded by a golden glow. Without a sound, the pair vanished from the cold, snowy area, leaving the rest of the team behind. Space, Watchtower. We all agreed on letting Roy Harper, or as we know him, Red Arrow, to stay in the league system until he shows the first sign of being rogue. Asked a Dark Knight to his fellow leaguers, who all had studied the reports on what the young man was doing like a solo hero. Everyone agreed on the terms for Roy Harper before they all pushed back their chairs and stood up. Leaguers, then we are done for today. Murmurs filled the room, and one by one the league's members left the room, leaving Batman, Wonder Woman and Superman behind. The three of them have much more work to do than only this small meeting. Now, the real meeting begins. Salem, Tower of Fate. Golden light radiated through the maze of stairs and space that blinded two individuals, while the third smirked at what that light could entail. Kent Nelson tilted his head to look to his cane and company that traveled with his faithful friend. The two beings helped each other up, and he could see that one of them is very young from his view of perspective and the other, a cloak of mystery. The one with the rippled patterned mask glanced down at the three, and Kent would swear that he saw the eyes radiate immense power. Well, what do we have here? A pedophile and his toy Kent could guess that it was the tall and mysterious figure who insulted a mighty being. A smile worked towards his face that only threatened to grow more when he caught the sign of an angry Lord of Chaos and this charlatan being insulted by this person. Please, release the honorable grandfather of mine or suffer immense pain. At the end, his kind voice disappeared and was replaced by a voice that even shook a Lord of Chaos in his boots. A small chill went down Kent's spine, but that was soon replaced by a warm caring feeling that filled him when golden light radiated through him. His feet came off the floor and he floated towards the parrot, which one showed amazement and the other a bout of amusement. His bound hands grasped his cane and without any words of power, he released his bounds and aimed his cane at the wall. In here a golden light shot out of Kent's cane that hit the wall behind them and transmuted the wall into an elevator in which Susanoo, Batgirl, and Kent took refuge. The trio caught the childish rant of the Lord of Chaos when he whined about wanting the helmet of fate. The elevator door slid shut and calm 70s music started to play. Kent tilted his head slightly to see the number of levels going up and with a smirk, he turned to the pair of heroes. I'm Kent Nelson, by the way. Batgirl and my friend who insulted those that held you in their custody are Susanoo. Batgirl returned by way of greeting. Kent adopted a serious look when he started. Well, Batgirl, we're up against an opponent with tremendous mystic power. You're speaking about that little guy. Batgirl responded at the warning that Kent gave them. Kent Nelson nodded his head, knowing full well that the little guy was dangerous. Yes, but Clarion the witch boy, the kid with the cat, is actually a Lord of Chaos. The ultimate enemy of a Lord of Order like Dr. Fate. The seriousness in his voice made Batgirl beepize how dangerous it actually is right now. Kent's serious expression suddenly melted away from his face and turned into a bright smile. But your friend here has tremendous mystic power. If he would become one with fate, the elderly man muttered the last part quietly. Not actually wanting someone to leave his own life behind for a full-fledged commitment to fate. And because of the cold glare that Susanoo sent his way to keep him quiet about his power. Anywho, Clarion is after the helmet, and if he gets his sticky little mitts on it, he'll turn the planet into his own personal playground of pandemonium. The sound of the elevator arriving at its destination resounded through the small space, and the doors slid open. The trio stepped out of the elevator and started to climb the stairs that lead them towards a large ancient golden bell that is adorned with old, long-forgotten languages that ooze power with each inscription. Closing the distance between themselves and the bell, a sound resounded through the air, and a burning line formed in the ceiling that turned into a door, and their fellow heroes fell out of it and landed in a heap on the floor. Kent Nelson peeked over his shoulders to the moaning heroes and smirked mischievously to them. Friends of yours. Zop. A blue lightning bolt surged towards them, and Susanoo threw several kunai towards his enemies that needed to dodge the deadly tools. The ninja saw his chance on returning the question, friends of yours. Kent Nelson moved towards the bell and knocked 3 times with his stick as a beautiful sound resounded through the air. The large bell started to radiate a faint golden light that sucked in Kent Nelson and Susanoo, including a certain witch boy. The Quolid, seeing Susanoo, Kent Nelson and a small demonic boy vanish inside a large bell, knew that he had to do something until one of them would return. But the question was, who will step out of the bell? The only thing he could make a decision over right now is taking out the enemy's ally. Miss Martian, link us up. Artemis, I want you to stay at distance, fire off arrows that will confuse or take him out. Kid Flash, I want you to take out his wand, it will make him powerless. Batgirl, get in his guard and stay out of Artemis's way. Miss Martian, you will assault his mind and I will join Batgirl in close range. Go. The Atlantean ordered through the mental link and they all took their position to take out the enemy. Meanwhile, at the tower, Kent Nelson and Susanoo arrived at the helmet of fate. The old wizarding man extended his hand towards the helmet, claiming it again to once more become Dr. Fate. Kent, I can take the burden of becoming Dr. Fate. Susanoo reasoned with Kent, who shook his head tiredly. The elderly man smiled at the younger one who watched him claim the helmet, a bright flash of golden light engulfed them both, and in the former place of Kent Nelson stood Dr. Fate. Bright golden light flared up from the Tower of Fate, a pillar of mystic energy shot upwards into the sky, basking the dark sky in an eternal holy light that drove away from the darkness. The golden light started to shrink, shimmering back to the tower before it exploded, causing a strong wind that billowed the clothes on those that stood in close proximity. Dust settled down and a tall figure with a golden Spartan-like helmet stepped into view. The helmet covered Kent Nelson's entire face, high-collared golden cloak billowed in the wind that covered his shoulders, and what Susanoo could see is fastened by 2 golden buttons. Underneath the cloak, he wears a dark blue-colored shirt with a golden oval set in the chest. Around his waist, he dons a large golden belt with a circle in the center with runes that glowed with power, and he wore deep blue pants that end in golden boots. Dr. Fate appears once more on Earth's surface. Susanoo grinned inwardly when he saw the famous sorcerer. Crimson eyes studied the hero that only has eyes for the personified form of chaos. He definitely liked the color gold and blue. Now let's see what he can do. Small wisps of golden mythical energy twirled around the doctor's left hand, and Fate's eyes glowed faintly when a curved golden barrier erupted in front of him with an ankh symbol that radiated power in the center. The barrier blocked a black mystical energy beam that was definitely the end if he didn't protect himself with his barrier. "Witch boy," Dr. Fate drawled out in a dull voice. The witch boy's hands, just like what Dr. Fate's did earlier, crackled with mystical energy. Faint wisps of crimson flames whirled around his hands before he pushed them forwards and thrust several hellfire orbs towards his nemesis. A deranged scowl marred the witch boy's face as he growled lowly, "Nabu." Susanoo's attention switched from Dr. Fate towards the one that opposes him, this so-called witch boy. A lone brow rose when he caught the small, diminutive form of this so-called Lord of Chaos. He is nothing more than a scraggly boy with long thin limbs, a thin neck and an angular face that appears out of a black oval tear. He has black hair in a mop-top style with V-shaped bangs and devil horns rising over the ears to point slightly above the top of his head. "Why does it not surprise me?" muttered Susanoo when he caught sight of the horns. "Little, freaky copycat. Since my ancestor and I started this trend, now everyone thinks they are badass with one." But his clothes' crimson eyes surveyed and studied Fate's opponent. The imp wears formal clothes and predominantly black, but include a white shirt with a tall, stiff collar. On top of this, he wears a skinny black tie, skinny black trousers, and pointed shoes, as well a distinctive jacket. Are not really made for battle. This battle is pointless. You sought to take the helmet before it reunited with its host. But you are too late. Arcane power swirled around his arms and small arcane orbs shimmered into existence and lunged towards Clarion, who glared at the Lord of Order. The Lord of Chaos leaped backward, avoiding the dangerous magic, while hellfire whirled before it took the form of a massive deranged fire dragon that lunged towards the possessed Kent Nelson, who erected a barrier that sparkled with different colors when the arcane dragon smashed against the barrier. "I've returned and so has order. Now, be gone, you little imp." "You will pay for that remark, Nabu. You can't hide forever behind your rainbow powers," shrieked Clarion. Small beaded red eyes glared at the Lord of Order, while the witch boy charged the second attack in his other hand that shot out several dark arrows that slammed into the barrier, causing spider web cracks to form before it imploded. Dr. Fate was launched into the air when the barrier failed to hold the attack, and with a loud thud, he landed several feet away on the tower's surface. Clarion laughed loudly at the state his nemesis found himself in and couldn't help but scream. "Give it up, Nabu. You are out of practice, and when you are gone, chaos will reign." "I will not let that happen. Chaos will never reign here on Earth." Dr. Fate retorted weakly from the floor and glared venomously at Chaos, who snarled in anger. Fate could feel his host's strength being leached away from him when he was hit by the attack. Nabu knew that Kent was too old for this, his body strained and stretched too much to handle the arcane might of his powers, but Kent wanted to leave this world with a bang. Conjuring a new barrier, Nabu protected himself and his host from Clarion's attacks. A pair of energized dark black limbs crashed down on the barrier, fingers dug into the doctor's mystic might as it tried to tear it apart to get to him. Tears started to form in the barrier, and Dr. Fate was kneeling on the floor, trying to keep his barrier intact. The Lord of Chaos snarled, pushing more arcane power in his magical limbs to tear that annoying glowing golden barrier down. Wisps of crimson hell flames that first danced around his arm were now spreading over the witch boy's whole body, covering and strengthening him in his crusade to crush the Lord of Order. "Shut it, you old fart." Order went out of style in the 20th century. Cracks appeared on the golden barrier. Quickly the spiderweb spread over the surface of the barrier, and Dr. Fate sunk closer to the tower's surface. A bead of sweat slid down from under his mask and splattered on the floor in thousands smaller pieces. Quicker and quicker the spiderweb spread across the barrier until it suddenly glowed before the sky lit up in golden light before the barrier suddenly exploded. Throwing Dr. Fate several feet from his original position on his back, head resting weakly on the floor, and his eyes fluttered close tiredly. The last images what his tired eyes took in were the images of Susanoo battling the pet of Clarion that isn't small anymore. Tikal, a once small domestic cat with ginger fur and tiger stripes, had been transformed into a grotesque man-high mountain lion with large piercing crimson eyes that flared dangerously. The demon leaped at Susanoo, who spun on his axis and deflected the paw that shot towards his heart. Deflecting the right paw with his left arm, Susanoo's lips curled up in a cold smirk when his calculations came out like predicted, and Tikal's right side was now wide open, and the ninja had prepared his next step. Using the momentum of his previous step, Susanoo accelerated his right arm that he thrust forward with a flat palm that connected with Tikal's unprotected rib cage, and the sound of several ribs cracking resounded through the air. The sound of ribs breaking was immediately accompanied with the feral howling of the demon cat that turned his head to glare at the one that caused him so much agonizing pain. "What? Don't look at me with those eyes, you can't blame me." After all, you yourself asked for such a thrashing. Susanoo's eye flared when he spoke towards the demonic being. Said demonic being did not take those words kindly as he swept with his left paw towards his enemy's face, who bent his knees and avoided the deadly claws, and Tikla's eyes narrowed when he failed again. The wail left the demon's throat when several jabs hit his wounded side that only increased the pain he was in, and Tikla's eyes widened in fear when his conscious mind caught the strange human counting. 32, 46, 59, 64 strikes. Tikla's eyes were first widened in fear and pain. But when he heard the last count leave the stranger's lips and the demonic flaring of his crimson eyes and the eerie three-tomo whirling hypnotically around his iris made it even scarier for the demonic being. The black rippled patterned mask didn't help in the least, especially when for a fraction of a second a third crimson eye with 9 of those tomo glared down at him before an agonizing pain surged through his whole being and his crimson eyes caught the side of the flat palm that is deeply buried in his abdomen before the demonic being was launched into the air and shot towards Clarion. Master and servant, or however you would likely call, slammed into each other and crashed with a sickening crunch against the crenellation of the tower. For Clarion, Tikal was the only living being he cares about besides himself. Seeing his pet in such a state, so weak, wounded and terrified of this unknown human that caused all these things to his pet, caused an ancient emotion to come back to life and roar like a fire. The witch boy's face narrowed, stretched and flattened, while his eyes took a deeper red shade, and the horns atop his head now grew slightly and became more demonically prominent. The small wisps that whirled around his body now gathered together and formed on hellfire that engulfed his whole form. The dark shadow grew in the crimson flame that grew to several feet and ended at 8 feet, and out of the flames, a pair of gleaming crimson eyes flared up and glared at Susanoo. The flames dispatched when the shadowy figure let out a terrifying roar, revealing a massive demon-like monster with ginger fur and black stripes, a tail resembling a cobra, and horns of a mountain goat. I will tear you to shreds for what you did to Tikal. Clarion roared towards the dark sky above him, and his cobra-headed tail moved behind him, hissing angrily towards Susanoo while it glared with its own crimson eyes. The demonic being lifted a foot and brought it forward where it planted itself firmly on the ground, causing the dust to flare up, and he blew out some hot air out of his muzzle. He moved his hoof, scraping it against the surface of the tower, before the demonic being took off towards Susanoo at a quick pace. Clarion was a bit hunched over and his head low to the ground, with his horns aimed at his target as he built up speed with each step, and a roar escaped his throat. Roar. Susanoo leaped out of Claw's reach before he let himself fall to the ground flat, landing on his hands when the cobra-like tail lunged out to him. Then the ninja pushed off with his feet to stand vertically on his hands to avoid a second claw that drilled itself on his precious spot before he was hit by the cobra that smashed itself against his back. He sailed through the air and landed on his hand before twirling to his feet, facing his enemies. Cracking his neck loose, his Sharingan Tomo started to spin and focused on the demonic being, Clarion. A frightening aspect of what his eyes can do is that they can find weaknesses in his opponents by foreseeing the movements. And just like now, Susanoo Sharingan sent information for the right action to counter his attacks. The demonic being, Clarion charged towards him, left arm pulled back in preparation for a one-strike knife hand killing blow that will shoot forward towards his chest, more precisely his heart. Plans for counter meet Clarion mid-run, then slide the last part towards him to avoid the strike. Now within his guard, I can propel myself into the air with an underhanded shate to the throat. Effect. Blocks the air pipes and causing discomfort. Clarion will reach with both his hands to his throat to lessen the pain that will give me a large opening to his abdomen that I will exploit by damaging his organs with one of Haki Hasengeki. That attack will deal tremendous damage and hopefully it will reveal his weakness or will cause him to retreat, hopefully it will be the last mentioned. Planned Susanoo when his Tomo stopped spinning and he had formed a plan to take out this large dumb demon. Moving his limbs as he started to accelerate, Susanoo met Clarion at the center of the field and twisted his body to avoid the knife hand strike and stepped into his guard. Sharingan met the crimson eyes of the demon as they stared at one another and Susanoo stepped on the beast's limb to propel himself closer to his target and trusted his flat palm hard against the throat of the Lord of Chaos. Shite. Susanoo's flat palm is in the form of the well-known signature attack of the Hyuga clan, back in the elemental countries. Now he mastered the feared fighting style of the Hyuga clan, and while he knows that there are some martial arts that are similar to his, but none of them come close to the Hyuga clan's prized fighting style. Speaking of his fighting style, Clarion's hands shot up towards his throat, which left his abdomen wide open, unprotected for the finishing move. Haki Hasengeki. Susanoo propelled his limb towards Clarion's abdomen while he gathered chakra in his attack and released all the built-up pressure that exploded at contact, and all the air escaped out of the Lord of Chaos as he shot through the air and landed several times on the ground, rolling until he came to a stop. A satisfying smirk appeared under the mask that stayed for a few seconds before it was replaced by a snarl. The reason at why he frowned is that the gleaming-eyed demonic being was slowly pushing himself up and turned his head to glare at the ninja for what he did to him. Susanoo glided into his stance to deflect anything that might come at him. Are the demons of this world so durable that he can shrug off the Haki Hasenjeki, a devastating technique that blows up your inner organs? The beast tilted his head, parting his maw letting, and a devastating roar escapes his throat. Roar. That hurt you, mortal meatbag. Spiderweb cracks crawled over the ground when Clarion planted his fingers on the floor and glared at the ninja with his crimson eyes. Suddenly the beast's cheeks bulged and grew only larger until he suddenly blew hard. Crimson flames shoot out of his maw like a flamethrower, and Susanoo already understood that this is one of his abilities and what danger it now possesses. Quickly moving to the unconscious form of Dr. Fate, Susanoo lifted him up in his arms and jumped away from the danger. Laughter ran from the demon when he saw that the supreme sorcerer of Earth and the meatbag jumped for their lives. Dance. Dance, little meatbag, you will not escape me. Susanoo threw the possessed Kent Nelson over his right shoulder to make his own movement and navigation easier in order to get them both out of this situation alive. Jumping a few feet back to avoid lava that quickly formed a pool, Susanoo went through a few ideas of what to do in this situation. Actually, I can do a lot to avoid this or beat this overgrown goat/tiger back to the underworld. But if I use one of my shinobi techniques, then I reveal to the world that I am not a human, not a human of this earth. My revelation would probably give me a lot of problems, but I am much safer than the Man of Steel himself that showcase his face to the world. And you will pay with your life for what you did to my Tikal. Roared Clarion, who glared at Susanoo, who danced out of danger's path. The areas of safety where he could retreat to shrunk when the demon covered them with fire or lava, both dangerous to him and his comrade. The demonic Lord of Chaos's eyes flared in uncontained glee when the safe surfaces for his pet's tormentor shrunk and spat out a taunt. Nowhere to run now, meatbag. Stay still and I promise to end you quickly after I have conquered Nabu's helmet. It seems I have no choice but to use one of my shinobi skills. Jutsu is out of the question. Susanoo was forced to move to the only spot that was not covered in lava or flames. The situation looked bleak. Then I will use my second best skill that made me famous throughout the elemental nation. Fuinjutsu. He drew a scroll out of one of his many seals that covered his armor and held it in one hand. Pushing a small amount of his energy that he calls chakra into the scroll, it started to unroll itself, and a pattern could be seen. Many black scribbles that others would think belongs to Nihon Japan. But for Susanoo, it is his old, now the almost dead language of the elemental nation that says, Fukahoin. That pitiful scroll will only help you to bring you quicker to your demise. Roar. Gloating at the pitiful scroll, Clarion's maw curled up into a smirk. This human is nothing more than a small ant under his paw and will be roasted now by his flames. Roaring, the Lord of Chaos shot out a ball of fire towards the pair that stood on the only lava-free spot. Die, meatbag. The fireball that was easily equal to Kaiten. Gakakyu no Jutsu flew towards them. Everywhere the fireball sailed by, lava was pushed aside and created small waves that crashed against the crenellation of the tower. And the lava that hit against the crenellation hissed like snakes and steam erupted into the air. The lava waves increased in strength when the demonic fireball closed the distance to the shinobi and Dr. Fate. Clarion's crimson eyes grew with each inch the fireball closed the distance, as did his unfriendly, feral smirk that revealed a row of sharp teeth. Giddy about the prospect of seeing them burn in hellish fire, Clarion could not help but to snigger in anticipation of the most beautiful sound to him, namely screams of despair. Watching, his feelings of sickening pleasure grew as the fire was only a few inches from those pitiful ants, only for his eyes to widen when in front of him his fireball vanished, or more exactly it was sucked in by the scroll until all the flames were gone, leaving Dr. Fate and Susanoo safe. How? Was all that left the Lord of Chaos's maw. Eyes spread wide in disbelief at what he just witnessed. This is not possible. Nothing in this world could absorb his attack, only sorcerers could ever hope of stopping him, sorcerers at the level of Dr. Fate who have the powers to stop him. What did you do? I protected Dr. Fate and myself, and that is all you need to know, Susanoo replied at the desperate question from the demonic being. The corner of his lips curled up when he felt the signs of Dr. Fate waking up on his shoulder, and in a low, quiet voice that bordered on whispering, he welcomed him back. Finally waking up, Fate. I need a little help here. You have found yourself in a difficult circumstance, I see. Dr. Fate surveyed his surroundings and slid off the shinobi's shoulder and back to his feet. Susanoo could detect a faint hint of amusement in his voice that irked him slightly. But what you did with that scroll of yours was highly bordering on magic. Tell me, Fate, how long were you awake while I was carrying you? The shinobi curiously replied while studying his surrounding and seeing that he didn't have much space to avoid any upcoming attacks. Turning his attention to Dr. Fate who now was standing beside him, he sent a meaningful look and said, and can you get rid of making a hand gesture to their surrounding? Golden light erupted around them, and Dr. Fate's symbol in ink appeared in the air that sent out its light, and the lava floated up into the air towards the symbol, vaporizing in the process. I was conscious when you pulled your magic, and does this meet your expectations? It will for now, Susanoo replied. Now, how will we stop him? His pet Tickle was his weakness, but the pet itself was not weak if he could take such a demonic form. And now how they are, a form they haven't taken for centuries, is a troubling thought. But this form of his has his strengths and weaknesses, so I suggest using that magic of yours. A mental voice echoed through his head that suspiciously sounds like fate. But the ninja had a feeling that he wasn't done yet with his mental speech. My host is old. His body is too old to carry this burden of being Dr. Fate. And probably after this confrontation, Kent Nelson will join his Inza. If he was too old, then why did you let him put on the helmet? I offered myself to take on that burden, retorted Susanoo back angrily. It was my master's choice to go down with the last flash. And I can feel that you yourself are not entirely human anymore. Susanoo's eyes hardened at the accusations of Nabu. You and I will speak at a much later date about this. Now explain how we can deal with him. Tikla's his sentinel and power. I guess it will be somewhere he can protect his source of powers. Like his tail that resembles a cobra and is difficult to harm without him knowing about it. Suggested Dr. Fate, who gained a raised brow that he could not see through the mask. The only thing is that he could guess is that Susanoo felt very annoyed at the prospect of having missed an opportunity to take the pet out. But Nabu could understand that the young hero did not know that the pet was its source and made the wrong choice. Susanoo's eyes flared, a low growl came from his throat when he had made a grave error and now paid with master and pet being fused together. Something he must rectify as he raised his hand to his back. His fingers wrapped around the handle of his blade, gamble shroud, and pulled her out of her scabbard. The shinobi slid into his stance, sword posed vertically in front of him. Gamble shroud, it is time to join the party, my dear. Saying that to his beloved weapon, Susanoo took off towards his opponent, who prepared itself for the confrontation and sucked in a huge volume of air before he released a fireball towards the incoming danger. Dr. Fate himself took off into the air, left hand outstretched with an ankh symbol shining brightly as he chanted and prepared for his magic to join the fight. Did Flash, duck. Calder called out a warning when Abracadabra aimed his wand at Flash's apprentice, and the tip glowed a deep purple light. The mentioned kid hero turned his head towards Calder, who looked at him in desperation when a purple light erupted from the wand and hit an arrow that caught the spell for Kid. Immediately Calder turned to the only archer on the team and smiled in relief. He raised his arm and gave her a thumb up. Thanks, Artemis, you just saved Kid's life. Artemis just nodded, placing a new arrow on her bow and pulled back the string, aiming and releasing the deadly projectile. The arrow cut through the air towards her intended target, namely his wand arm, only to see Abracadabra morphing her arrow into ropes that bound Batgirl's legs together as she snuck up behind him. I just did my job, Calder, damn it. The apprentice of Arrow replied before she cursed at the end. Batgirl landed with a roll on the floor and threw a batarang to intercept a spell towards her. She didn't lay there idly as she pulled out a second batarang that Batgirl used to cut through her bonds. Her bind slid off her legs, and with a twirl she was back on her feet. Back into action, Batgirl threw a smoke bomb to the floor to cover her attack on this charlatan. Looming up like a shadow like Batgirl grasped his wand arm and twisted the arm painfully to his back. Blue-green eyes glared from under her mask to the charlatan sorcerer, who smirked smugly back to her. Depart from your wand or else it will end pretty badly for you, Abra. You know everything about wands, don't you, Bat slut? Abra retorted back before he cried out in pain when Batgirl twitched his arm. The Bat vigilante wasn't all too happy to hear that from a villain, especially one that dressed very distasteful in her opinion. Unknown to her, Abra maneuvered his wand to her crotch and blasted a spell against it that caused her to moan loudly, and that gave Abra a chance to wriggle out of her grip. Abra twisted around her and then stands behind her, one hand cupped one of her covered breasts. That was such a lewd moan, Bat slut, I just knew that you're no different from all those other sluts in costumes. Bastard. Batgirl spat out, her voice full of disgust against the villain that now held her. Her eyes contained hate and shame about what had happened to her a second ago, while Artemis stands in front of them with an arrow in her bow. The archer too wasn't happy at what had happened, and she for one, want to drill him full of her arrows. Batgirl snarled, get your filthy hands off me, now. No, I won't, you're mine now. Abra smirked and then locked eyes with Artemis before he addressed her too with a lecherous voice. And you will become mine too, archer. I will teach you how to play with a very nice arrow. Drop dead, scum. I don't belong to anyone, and especially not to someone like you, scum. Artemis retorted back, her eyes flashing with uncontained rage. Batgirl suddenly thrust her elbows in the chest of Abra, elbow after elbow that rapidly planted into his chest before she is released from his grip, and she rolled aside to let her teammate fill him with arrows. Artemis released her arrows, and 3 of them sailed through the air towards him, at which Kadabra lazily redirecting them to an incoming speedster who was nailed to the floor. Abra glanced at the incompetent speedster, snorted arrogantly. "How can you fight me, someone like you with such ordinary powers?" A deranged smirk appeared on his face, and he pointed his wand at Kid Flash. "Powers that even your mentor, Flash, had difficulty with." Kid Flash sent Abra a nasty glare as he quickly pulled out the arrows and threw them aside. He pushed himself to his feet, dusting off his costume, and then pointed a lone finger at him. "Flash has proven that magic and your powers are nothing more than highly advanced technology. You, Abra, use futuristic technology and nothing more, now prepare for an ass-whooping of your life." Flash had no chance without help, and you, a mere imitation of him, thinks that he can defeat the great sorcerer Abracadabra with the help of kids and sluts. Abra insulted them with a wry grin and pointed his wand once more at the speedster, and the tip of the wand glowed with a blue light. The apprentice of Flash scowled in anger. Kid did not take kindly to be called a mere imitation of the original Flash. The young hero had recreated the experiment of Flash to gain access to these powers and succeeded. After a successful experiment, Kid had worked himself up to the point of becoming his partner in fighting crime. Kid would never call himself sidekick again. As Kid Flash, he became part of a team of super teen heroes, and as part of the team, he had infiltrated CADMUS where he rescued Superboy, following with a mission to stop Bane and his super drugs. And everything was fine until the Amazo mission where everything goes downhill. Why? It is because of the 3 new members of the team that suddenly joined them on the road to fame. Batgirl, Kid has no real problem with her, heck maybe he can get a date with her if she just stops thinking about that non-hero of hers. Artemis is someone that he loathes, she replaced Red Arrow despite what everyone else said to him, he knows better. And then we come to the one he just doesn't like, loathes and so many things more, Susanoo. That attitude of that wannabe hero does not sit well with Kid, what he does on missions, ordering them as if he is the boss. Arrogant, that is what he is, and he has much more things to say about him. But, in short, he loathes them, and when Abra told him that he is a mere copy of Flash, let's just say the Kid was done with it. Sparks of lightning crackled around him, his body vibrating at a high frequency, and then suddenly Kid Flash blurred out of view. A moment later Abra flew through the air and landed with a loud thud on the floor, groaning as the sorcerer spat a glob of blood out of his mouth, and a few feet away from Abra, Kid Flash shimmered in existence. "Take that, Abra, calling me a mere imitation of Flash." Abra pushed himself off the floor, wand aimed at Kid and smirked. "You might be fast but still stupid, Avada Ka-arg." The wand tip glowed a different light now, this one is an eerie green light, and he chanted his curse when he was interrupted by a green arrow that knocked his wand out of his hand, and 2 others drilled themselves into his hand and palm. Artemis had pierced him with her arrows, saving Kid Flash from harm or possible death. Not that it matters, Kid is a teammate right now, and she will keep an eye out for them. Smirking, Artemis said in a sugary tone of voice. "Not on my watch, Abra. And that was for laying claim on Batgirl and me, only Susanoo may lay claim on us." The sorcerer turned his head towards Artemis, his eyes filled with hate as he stumbled towards her. Lips stretched to a thin line that curled down in a snarl, he growled. "I will kill him, this Susanoo, and after that you and Batgirl can work in one of the underground strip bars where you stay for the rest of your lives." Hearing the disgusting threat, Batgirl appeared in front of him, her legs shot out horizontally and clashed against his abdomen, folding him in half which exposed his neck. With a swift, strong axe kick her foot came down and knocked him out. She spat on his face and with one last look of disgust, Batgirl turned around to join her team while Aqualid cuffed him with special cuffs. Artemis and Batgirl turned to look at the large golden bell and wondered what is going on wherever the bell sent their friend and teammate. Batgirl saw the worrying look on Artemis as understanding dawned on her. Susanoo was the first of her friends in this crazy world of villains and heroes. She was partly trained by him in close combat and she probably formed a crush on him despite his secret identity that only made it hotter in her own opinion. Batgirl herself only needed to worry that no one finds out that she has a crush on a handsome, blonde young man with startling blue eyes that bears the name Namikaze Naruto. A faint blush crept up her face when she thought about her handsome Adonis. Shaking her head to banish the thought of him, knowing that she will join him later in the day in his mansion, she placed a calming and comforting hand on her fellow girl teammate's shoulder. "Your crush will be fine, Artemis." Batgirl teased the archer who suddenly gained a full-body blush and stuttered incoherently back. The apprentice of Batman let out a clear tinkling laugh at her fellow heroine and shoved Artemis a bit. Artemis on her part poked her index together, her left leg drawing a circle on the floor as she turned off her head, trying to hide her blush. This only brought a wide smile to Batgirl who on her part enjoyed the slight teasing. The archer found her voice back or at least coherently enough to stammer out. "It isn't a crush, maybe a little. I mean, he is a great friend." "Yes, a great friend, mysterious but great. And it always begins like that." First, they are great friends, and that slowly blossoms into something more. Continued Batgirl, her teasing that brought Artemis a new level of embarrassment. Stamping her foot on the floor, the archer calmed down and decided to make it even. "And what about you and this mysterious boy that you have the hots for?" retorted Artemis playfully, a sly smile on her face. Now it was Batgirl's turn to turn off her head, hiding her blush when the image of Naruto came to her mind when they were together in the onsen and what she touched underwater. Her blush turned a deeper shade of red, her eyes stared into nothing with a dreamy, glazed look. Artemis leaned her head a bit closer to him and in a soft, husky voice she whispered. "Is your equipment long, thick and tasty?" Brule escaped Batgirl's lips as she absent-mindedly nodded. It definitely felt something like that. "Ho-ho, you naughty girl. How did you find out? Did you two play the adult doctor game?" Artemis couldn't let this golden opportunity pass. Batgirl almost replied back at the question of her fellow woman in the team when her mind registered the question. With a sharp turn of her head, she glared playfully with a bit of embarrassment at Artemis. "Artemis?" At the background of the girls, the team was hustled together. Stealing glances at the large golden bell. Wondering when the last member and Kent Nelson will return. Only Aqualid was a bit worried about Susanoo, only because he had accepted him as a possible teammate and he stated that clearly. "I hope Susanoo and Kent Nelson are fine. Especially when one of those villains followed them through the bell." "I don't care what happens to that rookie," said Kid Flash uncaringly while he crossed his arms. Megan lifted a single brow at that cold gesture of the apprentice of Flash. The Martian could not understand why he held a grudge at the mysterious member of the team. Placing her hand to her chin, index finger tapping as she delved into herself for her search for the reason for Kid's attitude toward Susanoo. At the meeting, Susanoo was a bit harsh at denying Red Arrow access. And he made very good arguments for his demands, but was that really necessary? Red Arrow and the others are friends, will Roy really betray us or put us in danger? "What are you thinking, Megan?" Superboy's voice brought her back from her thoughts. The Martian lifted her head from her hand and her eyes locked with that of her fellow alien. She sent him a small, reassuring smile, telling him that it is fine. "Susanoo," Megan replied with a curious look. The niece of the Martian Manhunter got a few strange looks from her surrounding teammates. Kid Flash's eyes hardened at the mention of that name, while Aqualid has a curious one that spoke he want to learn about this mysterious teammate. After all, only Robin was the only one that kept his identity a secret before the others joined. But it was Superboy's expression that is the most intrigued for her, as it seems he is looking with a bit of jealousy towards her. Why are most of our members so distrusting or right out rude towards him? I will tell you why. He is an arrogant little shit, that is what he is. Kid Flash started furiously. I thought the team was something outside the league without their influence. But suddenly a team of rookies comes and joins us. We already have an excellent hacker/martial artist, and his name is Robin. Why must we get another member of the Bat family? Not that she looks bad, but that besides, why? Aqualid suddenly felt a pair of eyes landing on his group, cold shivers crawled up his spine as Kid Flash continued his list at what is wrong with the newest members. Then we come with a new apprentice of Arrow, I bet she begged to join the team. Ha. And then I haven't started about that wannabe hero, Susanoo. So you think that we are not good enough for the team? Came a cold feminine voice from behind the group. Aqualid, Kid Flash, and the others turned around to face Batgirl and Artemis, whose glare at Kid Flash that told him to run. But before the girls could do him harm, the golden bell suddenly lit up and Susanoo stepped out with Kent Nelson in his arms, who looks to be sleeping peacefully with a content smile. The girls' mood did a 180 turn and they dashed towards Susanoo with a smile of relief. "Susanoo. Are you okay? We're so worried about you when that bell took you away from us." "I'm fine girls, I think," Susanoo said calmly, trying to convince himself and the girls that he is fine. Adjusting Kent in his arms, he looked for a second at him sadly before he abruptly turned his head to the elevator. I need speak to several people about what we will do now." Artemis looks worriedly at her friend. This is not the confident hero that had helped her so much, trained her and fought crime with her. What happened there that brought him in such a state? "Susanoo, please, what happened there?" "Chaos happened," came the cold reply. "Something terrifying happened and something the league needs to know." The cold feeling grasped his heart when Susanoo heard Kid Flash exclaimed, "Hell no. Why must the league hear about what happened in there? We can solve it on our own, we deserve that." "No kid, this is what they must know. And I need to go, I have a lot to do for Kent, the last honor for such a brave man." Without saying anything more, Susanoo descended down the stairs as a magical door appeared on the wall. The door slid open for him and Kent Nelson, the tower's late master. He moved to get through the magical portal when someone blurred in front of him, stopping him. The one that stopped him was no one else than Kid Flash, his resident hater. Sighing in annoyance and with not so much patience, Susanoo growled. "Not now, kid. I don't have the patience or the mood to listen to you." But Kid Flash did not step out of the way, he bullheaded stayed, blocking Susanoo's path. Crossing his arms over his chest, a scowl on his face and hardened eyes, Kid Flash spoke in a demanding voice. What are you hiding? Don't you trust us, huh? Susanoo gritted his teeth tightly and locked eyes with Kid, who flinched under the cold but bitter look. His arms tightened slightly around Kent, which didn't go unnoticed under the watchful eyes of Batgirl, Artemis, and Aqualid. Superboy's dark-colored eyes widened for a fraction before adopting a sad look. He turned his head to the side to process the somber news. A heavy atmosphere fell on the group and Superboy cleared his throat to gain the attention. I understand, Susanoo, what you tried to do, but don't you think we have the right to know you know what I mean, right? I understand, Superboy. But this is not something that is easily said than done. I hope you understand that I will keep this to myself for a moment until I have consulted several members of the League and a friend of mine. You just don't trust us. Before Susanoo could riposte coldly back, his patience long gone after all happened to him at the pocket dimension of Kent Nelson. Superboy grasped Kid's shoulder and pulled him back to the group. Flash's apprentice turned in bewilderment and fury toward Superboy and snarled. What? Why do you suddenly choose his side of this? All of you. It is not that I trust him more than you, Kid. I trust Superboy's judgments, as it is clearly that he caught something important that we didn't. And it is clear that he too did not want to share this with us. Aqualid tried to reason with Kid, who just scowled that everyone is against him. The Atlantean was curious too, but kept wisely his opinion and made for everyone the decision. I think to clear this mystery we need to go back to the base before anything else happens. Susanoo sighed, relieved at that decision, and sent Aqualid a thankful nod and one of apology to the others. Quickly the shinobi and the other heroes stepped through the doorway and arrived, much to their amazement, in the welcome hall of Mount Justice. Aqualid immediately called for Red Tornado and Batman. Well, much to everyone's surprise, Superboy led Susanoo through the hall and towards an empty room with a lone bed. Superboy turned to his teammate with a mournful expression as he opened the bed, at which that last mentioned placed Kent Nelson carefully in the bed before covering him. Come, Susanoo. Let us rejoin the others. Susanoo nodded at the friendly order as the two of them made their way out of the room. Once returning to the room, the two noticed the League members in the hall that consists of Batman, Red Tornado, Black Canary, Green Arrow and several other Leaguers. Report, Susanoo, Batman said softly when he noticed the somber look in Susanoo's eyes. Batgirl, hearing the soft, caring tone of her mentor, gasped slightly before she moved towards Susanoo and wrapped an arm around his shoulder, and Black Canary moved towards Artemis to keep an eye and possible support for what the report possible could entail. Susanoo brought his arm up and his hand moved towards his hood and pulled it down, revealing snow-white silver hair that reaches down to his shoulders, and then pulled up his mask to take it off. Snow-white pale skin was revealed to everyone that made his crimson eyes stand out more. He wears a low face mask that covers the lower part of his face that reaches towards his nose. Many of them were surprised at the gesture, but several thought that it was pretty important or it influenced him drastically to show that he is serious. Of course, Batman, Susanoo replied with a much stronger voice. And Batman could hear the bitterness in his voice. When the shinobi started, his voice was almost emotionless and he clenched his hand together. It started when Kent Nelson refused my offer of using the Helmet of Fate. Zatanna's eyes grew in size when he heard the words that left the young man's lips. He could not help but shout out. What? Why would you do that? I did what I must for the world. Kent Nelson is far past his prime, his body too depleted to be of use as a host for the Helmet of Fate. But he declined my offer, stating that it was his duty as Dr. Fate to stop chaos and put on the helmet. After that, we fought the personified form of chaos, and he was almost banished from our reality, but Kent, already in his weakened state, could only defend himself, and I fought his pet, Tikal. Unknown to me, that pet was his source of power and anchor to our reality. We fought, and when I made the finishing move I caught the grim state of Dr. Fate and unconsciously launched the pet towards his master to save Kent's life. The Leaguers and the Young Justice members listened to the report. It sounded like everything went well until Dr. Fate was placed in a grim situation. The Dark Knight stepped forward to address his thought. You made a good decision in saving Dr. Fate. I can't blame you for trying to reason with the sorcerer, as he is hard-headed about Nabu. Please continue. Batman gestured for Susanoo to continue, who now took a grave tone. The personified form of chaos did more as he somehow fused together with his pet, taking a demonic form that was unbelievable in power. One of his powers was the summoning of the dead. Gasps and denials were heard through the hall. Many Leaguers showed disgust, and the younger generation were beyond shock, and many understood now why Susanoo kept the information to himself. And it was not some random undead that the Lord of Chaos summoned, no. It was someone very dear to Kent Nelson. His late wife Inza Nelson was summoned by that disgusting imp. That is disgusting. Spat out the Dark Knight in disgust. Many of the Leaguers mirrored his thought, and the younger generation was very quiet. Not knowing what to say, let alone how to react to that or worse, experience that. Abomination. How can someone do something like that? How did Kent react? Kent Nelson was no more as he fell in shock. Many gathered heroes could only listen to the shinobi. Said shinobi took a deep breath, filling his lungs and at the same time trying to control his emotion. When he got control of his emotions he continued with his report. When Kent fell in shock, Nabu took full control of Kent's body, but that was exactly what Clarion wanted. Dr. Fate lost control and fought Clarion in a titanic fight, or that would have been if she didn't protect that miserable imp. In the end, the Lord of Chaos disappeared, leaving us alone with the ghoul who killed Kent Nelson. I did what no one else could do and Kent Nelson died on duty, a hero no one ever had seen. Susanoo Batgirl whispered in a soft, somber voice as she tightened her embrace around his shoulder. A tear slid down her cheek as she buried her face into his shoulder and felt his arm wrap around her. It was not only her, Artemis was embraced by Black Canary and Green Arrow, as were all the others with their own mentor, comrade or friend. Some of them held their head cool, and the Dark Knight felt for the first time like a beep as he cleared his throat to ask the most important question. Susanoo, I don't really like to ask this, but what about the Helmet of Fate? Several people, mostly the female members of the teams, glared at the Dark Knight who gulped inwardly. Safe. I put it in a place no one else can get in, and I mean literally no one. Replied the shinobi with an emotionless tone. He lifted his head up to look at the Dark Knight, his downcast look replaced by a look as full of determination as his voice. I will speak with several members of the League about the helmet only after the funeral of Kent Nelson. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.